Story 1. The Mirror That Breathed Back. They say mirrors only reflect what's real. But what if, just once, yours decided to breathe back? The suite felt almost too perfect, its silence curated, its scent of linen and champagne deliberate. Scott stood beneath the bathroom's dim light, tracing steam patterns on the mirror as the shower cooled behind him. The city beyond the glass wall hummed in blue and gold, a skyline pulsing like a quiet promise. Somewhere in that reflection he could still feel her watching, even though she'd said she was only half awake. He leaned closer. The mirror had fogged evenly a moment ago, but now it seemed to pulse, slowly, rhythmically. When he exhaled, the mist deepened. When he paused, it thinned as if the glass itself were breathing in reply. His pulse matched the rhythm before he realized it. Somewhere between his breath and its echo, something felt alive. Steam curled upward from the marble counter, refusing to fade. The air carried the faint sweetness of her perfume, still clinging to his skin. From the bedroom came a low hum, soft, almost tender. It wasn't quite her voice, though. The melody wavered in pitch, off by just enough to feel deliberate. Scott listened, frozen, the sound threading through the crack of the half-closed door like breath through lips. He wiped a small circle onto the mirror with his hand, just enough to see his own eyes staring back. But there, behind him, something shifted in the blur. A second silhouette stood too near, head tilted slightly like someone listening. He turned quickly. The bathroom was empty, the hum already fading. When he faced the mirror again, the outline had moved closer. From the bed, she spoke his name softly, still half asleep. He glanced toward the doorway, relieved for the sound of her voice. Real, warm, human. But when he looked back at the mirror, a faint mark had bloomed across the fogged surface. A handprint. Slender, perfect, pressed from the inside. The glass trembled almost imperceptibly, as though reacting to touch that wasn't his. Scott stepped closer, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. The air grew cooler near the mirror, the scent of steam giving way to something metallic and sweet. He raised his hand to align it with the print, finger to finger, palm to palm, but the reflection lagged, moving a heartbeat too late. Behind his shoulder, the other silhouette smiled, and the fog deepened around its grin. He pulled his hand away, and the mirror seemed to exhale, softly like disappointment. From the bedroom, the sheets rustled. "Scott?" she murmured, her voice blurred with sleep. He turned toward the sound, but the reflection didn't. It stayed perfectly still, head slightly tilted, as if considering him. For a moment, the air between them felt charged, as though the room itself had taken notice. He stepped back, reaching for the towel draped over the counter. The glass followed his movement, slow and deliberate, but when he stopped, it kept moving, closer, closer still. Its breath clouded the surface again, this time without his own. On the other side of the fog, two shadows met. One waiting, one unsure who was being watched. When he finally dared to touch the glass again, it felt warmer than it should have, almost like skin. His breath caught, the reflections didn't. For one suspended moment, the suite's quiet became a pulse, steady and synchronized, yet coming from somewhere behind the mirror. The air trembled faintly, as if the room were listening to itself breathe. Then, with a slow sweep of his palm, he cleared the fog completely. The reflection stayed. It smiled, not wide, not cruel, but with a knowing softness that made him step backward until his heel touched cold marble. In the bedroom, she sat up, watching him through the doorway. "What are you looking at?" she asked. He couldn't answer because the reflection was still smiling long after he'd stopped. Later, when dawn bled faintly through the curtains, Scott stood by the window, phone in hand, the city muted beneath the glass. She was asleep again, her breathing steady, human. He scrolled through his gallery absently, meaning only to delete the blurred photos from the night before. That's when he saw them. Rows of selfies, all taken in the bathroom mirror, all time-stamped 3:14 a.m. In each image he was looking directly at the camera, unsmiling. And behind him, the reflection leaned closer, fog curling around its mouth like breath. The last photo stopped him cold. It wasn't his face at all. The same luxury suite gleamed in the background, empty except for the mirror, still fogged as though waiting to breathe again. Story 2. Room key 417. They say temptation knocks, but sometimes it slides quietly under your door. One envelope. One key. No sender. Just a single line written in a familiar hand. Use it tonight. The envelope had no return address. Only his name, written in a hand he almost recognized. Inside, a metal key pressed against the paper like a heartbeat caught in steel. For 17. The same number she'd whispered once before. No message this time, only a note. Use it tonight. Scott turned the key over under the hallway light. Its edges were cold, recently handled. The motel was nearly empty at this hour, corridors breathing that low hum of refrigerators and rain. He told himself he wasn't curious, just restless, as he pocketed the key and walked toward the flicker at the far end. The corridor stretched too long for such a small motel. Each step sounded soft, then distant, as though the carpet swallowed his weight. Above room 417, a light pulsed with a slow, nervous rhythm, the kind that made shadows blink. The door was slightly open, as if waiting for his hand. Inside, the air was warm and damp. Steam drifted lazily from the bathroom, carrying a faint trace of perfume. A scent he'd once known against his skin, floral with something metallic beneath. The shower hissed behind the closed curtain, steady and human. But the room itself was empty. He closed the door behind him. The lock clicked with a sound too certain, too practiced. His reflection trembled in the mirror above the dresser. Pale light, damp air, a pulse at his throat that wouldn't slow. He called her name once, low, unsure whether he wanted her to answer. The only reply came from the bathroom. A soft shift, fabric or skin, behind the curtain. The shape moved, blurred by steam. For a moment, the rhythm of the running water seemed to breathe with him. He took one slow step closer, feeling the tile cool beneath his shoes, the perfume thickening the air. He reached for the curtain, hesitating just short of the fabric. A single drop of water slid from it and struck his wrist. Warm, too warm. The steam coiled upward like breath against his ear. Somewhere behind it, someone whispered, or maybe it was only the water shifting against the drain. "Is that you?" he asked, the words catching halfway out of his mouth. The shadow froze. Then, slowly, it leaned closer, the outline tracing the suggestion of a shoulder, a hand, something intimate and unsteady. He felt the scent before the sound, her perfume, but the wrong voice, soft and unfamiliar. Scott's breath trembled in the haze. He lifted the curtain in one slow, deliberate motion, the kind born of fear disguised as courage. The water still ran, loud and constant, yet the tub beneath it was dry. Not a drop on the porcelain. Only the sound, and the faint scent of her perfume clinging to the air. He stepped back. The curtain fluttered once, though there was no wind. In the mirror, the doorway behind him looked darker than it should. He turned toward it, certain someone stood there. But the hall beyond was empty, only the flickering light, pulsing like a heartbeat through the crack of the door. The door eased shut on its own. The latch slid into place with a small metallic sigh, followed by the deeper click of the deadbolt turning. From the other side, faint footsteps paused, then retreated down the corridor. He didn't call out, part of him afraid the steps might stop and come back. The water continued to run. He stood beside the empty tub, key still in his palm, its metal gone warm against his skin. A single question lingered where her voice should have been. Who locked the door? The sound of the shower deepened, as if something beneath it had started to breathe. Story 3. The necktie left behind. Sometimes, the most intimate things we leave behind are the ones that come back, changed. The hallway smelled faintly of polish and sleep, that sterile early morning quiet that belongs to buildings before people wake. Scott paused outside the apartment door, phone still lit with her message. You forgot something. He hadn't seen her in weeks. The timestamp was 4:12 a.m. No emoji. No explanation. Only that small sentence that now felt heavier than it should. The handle turned too easily. Inside, the air was cool and thin, as though someone had left a window open all night. Light from the city spilled across the floor, touching the corner of a bed that looked too neatly made. A trace of perfume, hers unmistakable, lingered in the air, but colder, detached from warmth or skin. He almost spoke her name, but the silence pressed back, asking him not to. He stepped inside, careful not to let the door click shut behind him. The apartment looked the same. The framed photographs, the half-dead plant by the window, the single glass on the counter, yet everything felt arranged a little too deliberately, like a set rebuilt from memory. He noticed small differences. The curtains drawn tighter, a book turned upside down, a chair angled toward the bed. Someone had been here. Recently. On the pillow lay a folded shape of dark silk. His tie. The same one he'd left, tangled, at another client's apartment across the river 3 nights ago. He recognized the faint stain near the seam, the loosened thread at the edge. But here it was, placed precisely as if by hands that knew him well. The air around it seemed warmer, trembling slightly with the heat of something that had just been there. He reached out, fingertips hovering above the silk. The warmth was undeniable, not the kind left by sunlight, but the ghost of skin, of pulse. His reflection wavered faintly in the mirror opposite the bed, a dark outline against the pale window light. For a moment he thought he saw another shape behind him, standing just beyond the doorway, but when he turned, the space was empty, or pretending to be. Scott sat on the edge of the bed, the tie resting across his palms. The smell of her perfume deepened with movement, unfurling like breath from the walls themselves. He remembered how she used to adjust that same tie, slow and deliberate, eyes fixed on the knot as if tightening something invisible between them. That memory, intimate, harmless then, now felt like a warning left too late. He stood again, uneasy, and walked through the apartment. Every surface looked undisturbed, yet every corner carried a presence, a soft echo that shifted when he moved. The faint hum of the refrigerator became almost rhythmic, like measured breathing. He opened the bathroom door. Dry towels, untouched soap, a single droplet on the faucet trembling as if from a heartbeat. When he returned to the bedroom, the tie was no longer where he had left it. It now lay draped across the headboard, perfectly centered, like an offering or a signature. His throat tightened. The perfume had thickened, now mixed with something sharper, the metallic scent of heat on skin, of closeness without contact. He whispered her name again, quieter this time, and the air seemed to listen. A sound rose behind him, not a footstep, not exactly, more like the creak of fabric stretching in the dark. He froze. The mirror caught a flicker of motion, a silhouette that wasn't his, standing too near the window. He turned slowly, pulse drumming in his throat. Nothing. Only the faint outline of dawn pressing against the blinds, pale and watchful. Yet he knew he hadn't imagined it. The air still trembled, disturbed by presence. Then came the voice. Low, deliberate, a breath wrapped around words. You wear it better. The syllables brushed his ear, though no one stood close enough to whisper. The tie slipped from his hands and landed soundlessly on the floor. He backed away, but the perfume seemed to follow, surrounding him in something that felt almost like an embrace, gentle, possessive, and cold. He left the apartment without looking back, the dawn unraveling behind him like a held breath finally released. In the elevator's mirrored wall, his reflection looked pale, his collar slightly open. No tie. He touched the hollow of his throat, feeling the skin cool beneath his fingers. The city outside was waking, ordinary, unknowing, and yet, every passing window seemed to watch him go. The next morning, when he reached for a fresh shirt, he saw it waiting in the drawer. The same silk tie, neatly folded, thread still loose near the seam. It smelled faintly of perfume, faintly of someone else's breath. He closed the drawer carefully, as if sealing a secret. For a long moment he stood there listening to the quiet apartment breathe. Then he asked himself, would you keep it or burn it? Story 4. Vibration at 2 a.m. Some calls don't come from another person. They come from the part of you that still wants to be touched. The apartment was too still for that hour, 2:03 a.m. by the clock that hummed softly against the wall. Scott sat on the edge of the bed, his pulse catching the faint rhythm of the rain outside. The air smelled faintly of linen and the perfume his client had worn hours earlier. Somewhere between fatigue and something heavier, he waited for silence to decide what would happen next. She had asked him for quiet. No calls tonight, she'd said, her tone halfway between plea and command. He'd nodded, slipped his phone face down on the bedside table, and let the world shrink to the soft light and her breathing. But when the first vibration came, low, deliberate, as if someone were tracing a line across the wood, he thought, absurdly, that it was his own heartbeat answering her. The phone lay still, its screen blank, the hum fading like a swallowed word. He reached for it, hesitated, the air around the bed felt charged, listening. Her breathing shifted behind him, a sigh or perhaps a question left unfinished. Scott turned, but she was already turned away, one arm buried beneath the sheets as though clutching something unseen. Then it came again. The vibration, slower this time, almost human in its pulse. A rhythm he recognized too precisely, too short, one long. The same pattern his hands had traced earlier, unintentionally intimate. His throat tightened. The sound didn't come from the table anymore. It came from under the sheets. He froze, listening. The hum rolled through the mattress, faint but steady, like a whisper pressed against skin. For a moment he thought she was laughing under her breath, that low, private sound that meant nothing and everything at once. But when he leaned closer, her shoulders were still, her face turned toward the wall, eyes closed as if in sleep or pretense. Scott pulled the sheet back an inch. The vibration stopped instantly, as though it had been waiting for him to look. Beneath, there was only darkness and warmth and the scent of her perfume, now sharper, metallic. He reached farther, air, linen, silence. Then, from the table beside him, the phone trembled again, sinking with the pulse in his wrist. He stared at the screen. No number, no caller ID, just light pulsing softly in time with his own breath. It shouldn't have been possible, yet the rhythm felt deliberate, almost affectionate. He touched the glass. The vibration paused, then resumed beneath his fingertips, echoing his pressure exactly. Each touch was answered as if the phone were remembering him. Behind him, the bed springs shifted. A subtle movement, weight redistributing, like someone rolling closer without ever touching. The air carried warmth again, familiar and unwelcome, and the faint scent of skin after tension. He told himself not to turn, not to look. But in the reflection on the phone screen, a blurred shape leaned nearer, too close to be only shadow. He turned before he could think, but the space beside him was empty, the sheet cool, uncreased. Only the scent remained, faint and restless, like breath caught in fabric. Then the vibration deepened, a sound between pulse and voice, filling the room with a low, steady thrum. It felt inside him now, rising from the mattress, through the ribs, into the hollow where fear and something else lived side by side. The phone lit up again. This time the caller ID glowed with a name he recognized too well, his own. Scott calling. The letters wavered as if seen through water. He felt a tremor travel up his arm when the device vibrated again, matching the exact rhythm of his heartbeat. For one suspended second, he believed the call wasn't from the phone at all, but from whatever inside him still wanted to answer. He pressed accept before reason could intervene. The room dimmed, sound folding inward. On the other end, no voice, just a low breath that matched his own, perfectly synchronized. The hum became steady again, a heartbeat without a body. He whispered his own name, and the sound came back to him through the speaker, softer, delayed, as though spoken from beneath the sheets. When the light finally faded, the phone was blank, cool to the touch. The clock read 2:59. His client stood in the doorway, wrapped in silence and confusion, claiming she'd never called him, had never even met him before tonight. Scott looked at his reflection in the dark window, his face half there, half not, and wondered which version had answered first. Story 5. The House That Waited. A single candle in a silent house. Client who never speaks, and a voice that knows your name, even after you've left. Tonight, Scott learns that some lights don't wait to be lit, they wait to be noticed. The rain began just as Scott turned off the main road. It wasn't the kind that rushed down in sheets, but a patient, steady rhythm that blurred the windshield and softened every sound. His GPS flickered once, then went dark, leaving only the dirt path ahead, glistening like wet ink under his headlights. The house waited at the end of it, small, unlit, and too still for anyone to truly live there. He parked. The engine ticked as it cooled, the only heartbeat in that stretch of silence. Through the rain, a faint glow pulsed from a window, a single candle, steady and deliberate. The client had insisted on darkness. No lights, please, she'd written. Something about the phrasing had felt personal, almost intimate, like a rule meant for him alone. She opened the door before he could knock. No greeting, only a shadow framed by the candle's small halo. Her face was half lit, the rest claimed by darkness. She lifted the candle, its flame trembling between them, and with one slow gesture pressed a finger to her lips. Silence, the kind that fills the lungs until it aches. He stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of rain and wax, with something else beneath it, something human, warm. The room was spare. A table, 2 chairs, curtains drawn tight as if against the world. When he moved to speak, she tilted her head slightly, warning him again without words. The only sound was the candle's quiet hiss and the distant breath of the storm. She crossed the room slowly, her steps barely audible on the wooden floor. The flame followed her, sketching brief outlines, a shoulder, the curve of a hand, a strand of hair catching light before vanishing again. She placed the candle on the table between them, and for a moment, their reflections trembled together in the molten wax. He felt the quiet press of her gaze, a question without sound. When he shifted, the floor gave a faint sigh. From somewhere behind him, close enough to feel, came a whisper of his name. Not a voice raised, but a breath shaped around him, familiar, tender, wrong. He turned, but the space was empty. Only the candle burned, steady as a pulse, its light painting soft movements along the wall that seemed to breathe with them. He stood still, every instinct caught between leaving and listening. The whisper came again, closer this time, brushed against the back of his neck like a secret. The candlelight flickered, and in that wavering moment he saw her shape at the far corner, watching him with an expression neither invitation nor warning. Her lips moved, but the words were carried off by the storm clawing at the windows. The silence afterward felt heavier than any sound. He took a single step toward her, the air tightening as if the house itself were holding its breath. Another whisper. His name, now from the opposite side of the room. He turned, pulse quickening, and saw only walls, shadow, the trembling light that refused to stay still. Something unseen circled the edges of the dark, patient, deliberate, familiar. He reached for the candle, his fingers hovering above the fragile flame. The warmth of it brushed his skin, almost like breath. From behind him, another candle flared to life, soft at first, then steady. Its light crept across the floor toward his feet, stretching their 2 shadows until they met. He didn't turn. He only listened to the faint sound of footsteps that were not his. The air shifted, slower, thicker. She was close now, though he couldn't see her. He felt the nearness of her presence, the weight of it at his shoulder, the unspoken pull to look. A whisper grazed his ear, warm and pleading, "Don't leave the light." His name followed, softer, dissolving into the storm's breath. He turned, half expecting her face, half fearing it, but the space behind him was empty. The 2 candles burned for a moment, facing each other across the room, one trembling, one still. Then with a slow sigh the first went out. The other remained, its flame bending as if listening. He felt something pass behind him, a movement without sound, the air brushing his hair as though the night itself had drawn near. The rain softened, the silence deepened, and he realized he was no longer sure which side of the flame he stood on. By morning he had left without remembering when. The booking app on his phone refreshed itself, screen flickering once before the signal returned. A new request glowed at the top of the list. Same address, same time, only now under his own name. The house still waited. The candle still burned. And somewhere in that quiet rain, a whisper asked again, almost tender, "Would you blow it out?" or keep it burning.